Well, good Tuesday. Welcome back to winter, right? Where else can you live, experience winter one week, summer the next, and then go back to winter? So it is Michigan. It's what we love about it. So guys, it is Tuesday, April 25th, the year being 2023. And as I gave you a little bit of a heads up, today is about that one thing you always hear about, and yet we don't know enough about it to even be dangerous. So today, through the courtesy of one of our title partners, ATA National Title, we have with us Tony Viviani, who is our, we'll call it expert for the day in regards to 1031 exchanges. So with that, Anthony, I'm keeping it simple and turning it over to you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting us. We're going to talk about 1031 exchanges today, and we're going to keep it brief, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that we leave the minutia to the guys that do this professionally. You know, they handle exchanges. That's their gig. You guys are real estate professionals, and hopefully this will be a tool that you can put in your toolkit for your clients to kind of give them some options, so to speak. But I think the first thing that we need to do when I do these exchange talks, and I like to have more of a conversation than a talk because I hate listening to myself. But I think the most important thing that we come away from this with is one very important thing, and I usually have everyone stand up, when we're doing it live, and stand up and repeat after me. I am not a tax professional. Please seek out a tax professional. And that's very critical because you don't want to put yourself in the position of, well, you told me XYZ and it's not XYZ. I think that's very, very important for you to do that. And again, like I said earlier, this is really an item that you're going to put in your toolkit. And hopefully it's going to pay you some dividends and bring more business your way. Why? Because as opposed to your competition out there, who may not even know what 1031 exchanges are, you're going to have at least what I'm going to do today is talk about the 35,000 foot level view of exchanges. I don't think it's going to serve you properly if we get into the minutia. So that being said, I think that, again, there are some little nuggets that you're going to come away with from our talk today. And one of the big ones is when you're talking about 1031 exchanges is you're looking at property that is held for the productive use in a trade or business or for investment purposes. Now, I hope you all have your exchange facts literature that I sent out. I'm assuming everyone does.
Yeah, Tony, we did send that out, so everybody has it in the invitation that we sent out to today's session, both Friday and then again here today. You should have that.
Okay, great. I think what I'd like to do is, if you have that exchange facts material in front of you, I'm certainly not going to read to you because I know all of you know how to read. What I'm going to do is I'd like to go down to the last page of that piece of that material, of the materials, and you'll find a sheet at the end that's titled "The Economics of a 1031 Exchange." And I think that if you come away with anything, this is where the money meets the road, so to speak. You're looking at, well, why should I consider doing a 1031 exchange? Because keep in mind, the idea is to defer capital gains exposure. Now, remember, the service, and I work with them a lot. My background is real estate law and tax law. They don't want to hear the words tax avoidance, avoiding the payment of taxes. Their heads explode. Okay. So what we're doing is we're talking about deferring that taxable event when you sell the property. You purchased it at a certain price, you're selling it for an X amount of dollars, and the difference between the two, just to keep things simple, the difference between the two is where that capital gains exposure is going to come from. So let's take a look at the economics of a 1031 exchange. And I again tried to, I've made it simple even for myself. The purchase price on this particular piece of property is $50,000. Okay. And the taxpayer, and we're going to refer to the taxpayer as specifically because that's what the service calls them. They would be the sellers in this case. The taxpayer has depreciation on that property of $40,000. So basically the basis on that property, in other words, the difference between the purchase price and what the purchase price less the depreciation they've taken over so many years, that basically leaves them a basis of $10,000. Now they're going to turn around to that $50,000 piece of property that they purchased 10 years ago or 5 years ago. They're going to sell the property and it's going to sell for $85,000. So theoretically, the taxable gain on that is going to be $75,000. Okay. Going to be $75,000, but the tax on the gain itself is only going to be on $15,000. Okay, it's going to be $15,000 is what the tax is going to be. All right. So if you go down the sheet of paper there that we have, the economics of a 1031 exchange, you'll see that without section 1031 deferral, they would only be able to buy a piece of property for $70,000. But with the deferral, they could buy a piece of property that's $85,000. So basically, all the money that they're saving at this point in time, okay, today, the money that they're saving through the deferral of capital gains, they have to take that money and plow it back into the property. So what does that mean for you? That means your client is going to turn around and buy a more expensive piece of property. That's a good thing, I guess, for you guys, right? I would assume so. Under the code, they have to buy a piece of property that is equal to or greater than the value of the old property. I'm Italian, so you'll see me do one of these. See, so I can't help myself. Sorry. So you can also see if you go down the sheet there, the economics of the 1031 exchange, you'll see without the benefit of 1031 exchange, they'd only be able to buy a $280,000 piece of property, as opposed to with doing an exchange, they'd be able to buy a $340,000 piece of property. Why? Because they're plowing that money that they would have spent in paying tax. They still keep that and they reinvest it in the new property. Okay, that's really critical when you're talking with your clients about, you might want to consider doing an exchange, and here's why. And you could just give them the sheet if you want to. That's fine. You please feel free to use this as a handout for your clients. That's
Hey,
fine.
Tony, can I jump in and get a little clarification? And gang, if you've got anything, obviously, take yourself off mute at the appropriate time or drop it in the chat session here. The aspect of depreciation, I'm assuming that's the tax benefit, 27.5-year depreciation. Is that what we're referring to here?
Yes, that's what we're referring to.
Okay, and guys, this is where, again, Tony, I love what you said. One that we always preach is, we're not an attorney. Well, the second one is, I'm not a CPA.
Yeah.
So make sure that we get the professionals involved. But what today is about is, again, to really get to the point to where we're smart enough to go, you need to get a CPA, but know enough to guide someone that you can help them as far as making a decision for purchase and sale. So the basis remaining then, can you give a little bit more as to what that actually means, that 10 grand, the difference between purchase price and depreciation?
Sure. Obviously the depreciation is something that they've been taking on their tax returns over the years against the subject property. Okay. So that $40,000 is reducing the basis of the property. When I talk basis in terms of the tax code is the going in price when you purchase the property. That's your tax basis. Okay. So what's happening here is that you have a purchase price of 50 grand, an original purchase price of 50 grand. You've got depreciation that's totaled $40,000 over whatever time period it is. So basically you've reduced your basis in the property. Now the basis is no longer 50 grand, it's 10 grand. And that's a good thing from a tax standpoint. Okay. That's a good thing. And again, you're not the expert. I mean, as many tax classes I slept through, attended. It was a joke, honest. You know, I wouldn't even I would not hesitate to say, you know what, you need to go talk to your CPA. And the reason for that is their CPA is going to know what the numbers are for their piece of property. Okay. And keep in mind, we're never talking about your principal residence situation. Okay. Because there's a different code section for that. 1031 does not work for principal residences. Okay. It's business or trade or investment. That's what you have to keep in mind. Business or trade or investment. Could it be a rental? Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of people are doing that nowadays. Okay.
So if I could then, again, Tony, just to help understand a little bit more, the 10,000 makes sense. I'm taking the 10,000 from the 85,000. That's leaving the 75,000.
Yes.
So the tax on a gain of 15,000, where is that number as a result of?
The tax on the gain was just an average tax exposure on that $75,000. So I was just taking an average.
Gotcha.
And give you a point of reference.
All right.
Yeah.
Makes sense then. I think we're good.
Okay. So again, that's what we're talking about is giving you a tool that's going to bring more clients to you who are, and I'm sure a lot of you have clients that purchase rental properties, investment properties. Those are the people that you should be talking to about 1031 exchanges. Absolutely. And I'll say this too. When you're talking with them about it, I certainly would say to you, if you're going to direct them somewhere, okay, your job is to be helpful to your client. I would say direct them to one of the title insurers. And the two that I always use are IPX, which is a Fidelity National company, Chicago Title, TransNation Title, Lawyers Title. They comprise all of those, Security Union. They're multi-billion-dollar companies doing exchanges. Their company name is IPX. Okay, they're one of them. And I'll tell you this, IPX gives the taxpayer who is doing the 1031 exchange a guarantee of safety that their money is going to be safe. To my knowledge, no other exchange accommodator does that. The other company that I like to use is Stewart Title, who is another insurer, title insurer. And their company is called Asset Preservation. And again, why do I say that? I'm not getting a dime out of this, okay? Just disclosure, all right? I do it only because there's a lot of mom and pops out there, and God bless them. That's what makes America great, is the mom and pop operations. But when we're talking about someone holding my $200,000 or my $500,000 or whatever it is, I want to make sure that there's a lot of assets backing up the money that they're holding for me. Okay. And that's why I suggest you go with companies like that if you're going to provide your client with a referral. Okay.
So Tony, that might be a little bit of the question then. So we've got somebody who they should consider a 1031 exchange. How do we as real estate agents handle that? I'm guessing it's, we sell one, we help them buy the other, but they should have been already in touch with one of these companies.
Yeah, I think that if your client is involved in business, trade, or investment, I think that you need to put them in touch with them. And simply from the standpoint that, you know, when you're doing your purchase agreement, if they're going to do an exchange, and we were going to talk about this, so I'm glad you mentioned this, you have to add what's called a cooperation clause to your purchase agreement. And if you scroll down from the beginning of our materials, I think there is a page, unless I'm getting old and senile. Yes, there is a cooperation clause page that has examples of what a cooperation clause should contain, the language that it should contain. Okay. And basically what it's saying is, hey, buyer, heads up, I'm doing a 1031 exchange. Not going to cost you any money. It's not going to delay the transaction. I'm just giving you a heads up. That's what I'm doing. Okay. And you need to have that in your purchase agreement. You should have that in your purchase agreement. And again, there's examples on there. Feel free to cut and paste. They're good to use. So from that standpoint, you want to make sure that, yeah, if they're considering going with a 1031 exchange, that you put them in touch, or you give them the information that they need to get in touch with a qualified intermediary. And that's what exchange accommodators are called. They're called qualified intermediaries because, and here's why, that essentially in a 1031 exchange setting, the seller cannot take receipt of the proceeds of sale. The qualified intermediary has to take that money, and they hold that money. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. You want to make sure that you give your money as a seller to someone that has the assets to back up what you're giving them. I mean, you know, and again, I don't mean anything derogatory against mom and pop operations. God bless them. But, you know, especially you guys as real estate professionals, you want to protect yourselves too in doing this. So you're going to want to send your client to someone that you know is going to take very good care of those funds throughout this process. So again, once the sale happens, the proceeds of sale go to the qualified intermediary, or if it's a reverse exchange, it'll be the exchange accommodation title holder. But that's a whole nother, again, I'm trying to stay 35,000 feet here, guys.
Yeah, and Tony, I was going to say, just to make sure everybody understands, we're talking the first transaction where the investor is selling the property that they're going to then do in exchange for another one. They don't need to see their funds.
Right. That's exactly.
So they're a seller first, then they become the buyer.
Right.
And Tony, I think another question just popped here that how does it work for international properties? Would it be the same thing? Do they qualify?
You know what, there's a white paper on that that came out not long ago that the service issued, and right now it's, from reading the white paper, they do not allow exchanges of foreign property. It has to be domestic. That
Excellent.
may change from what I've heard. They're talking about it in Washington, but you know how Washington is and how quickly things get done. So I wouldn't bet on it, but like if a lot of times I'll get calls about Canadian property and things like that, and yeah, they just don't allow that, at least at this point in time.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
I think another thing that, again, it's not something that I think you need to memorize. I don't think you need to memorize any of this stuff. But on the page prior to the cooperation clause page, and it would have been nice had I had the presence of mind to, well, it is actually page 6. I did paginate, wouldn't you know? You'll see 3 identification rules. Those are very important rules for your clients to know. The 3 property rule really comes into play a lot, especially if they're going to buy a multiple of properties, and it's great for you. Again, this is what this is all about. And exchanges are starting to gain a lot of momentum because of the market we're finding ourselves in. So the 3 property rule, identify 3 properties, doesn't matter what the cost, what the price is of those properties. And keep in mind, again, according to the code, it has to be equal in value or up. So it has to be at least the same price, but the service likes to see an increase in the value of what the taxpayer is going to buy, which again is good for you. Okay. There's the 200% rule, the 95% rule. I'm not reading them to you. Just know that they're there. Okay. Just know that they're options for your clients. And that they should be aware and talk to their CPA about that. Okay. So essentially what's happening here in a 1031 exchange setting is there's a transaction. It's the sale of a piece of property. Again, not a principal residence. That's a whole different code section. It is a piece of property that complies and that meets the requirements of a 1031 exchange. Okay, so that would be another question for IPX, asset preservation, a CPA, everybody but you, okay, to answer that question. All right. And assuming that the piece of property that they're selling meets those requirements, the transaction is very similar to just your regular run-of-the-mill sale, purchase. Okay. No different. The only difference is in the purchase agreement, there's a cooperation clause, and the proceeds of sale do not go to the taxpayer, but go to the qualified intermediary who's going to sit on that money. And there has to be within 180 days of closing. You'll find that in your materials. Within 180 days of closing, the taxpayer needs to identify the new target property. They need to identify that property. And what they do is they don't need to enter into a purchase agreement. They need to simply write out on a piece of paper. It's very informal, which is surprising for the service, but it's merely, hey, qualified intermediary, I'm looking at purchasing property 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They can identify as many as they want, but if they're using the 3 property rule, it has to be a minimum of 3, obviously. Okay. And then the other 2 rules are 95% and 200% rules. And I'm, again, not going to get into that. So as of 180 days from the date of closing on the relinquished, what's called term of art, relinquished property, the taxpayer is relinquishing their property. Now they're going to go out, identify the new target properties that they're going to purchase, and they're going to submit that to their qualified intermediary, to IPX, asset preservation, whoever it is they decide to use. Now, keep in mind, can they use their attorney? My answer to that is no, they cannot. Because why? Because the attorney is duty bound under our code of ethics to do whatever the taxpayer tells them to do whatever their client tells them to do. Okay, so no, they cannot. They have to use a qualified intermediary who will say to them, I can't give you your money back unless you send me a document that basically says you're unwinding this 1031. You haven't identified anything. It's 181 days. You couldn't find what you wanted. Excuse me, what you wanted. So therefore, you're just going to unwind it and you're going to take the proceeds and pay the tax and have a nice day. Okay, that certainly is a possibility. Okay, so again, the transaction itself is very much like what you're used to. There's really not a lot of difference other than where the money ends up. It doesn't end up with the seller, taxpayer, it ends up with the QI, with the qualified intermediary. Now, they have to identify their new properties. They have to give something physically in writing to the qualified intermediary to document that they have identified the property. And I apologize. It just occurred to me. I said 180 days. They have to identify their properties within 45 days of closing, and they have to close on the property within 180 days. Sorry, getting old, I guess. So keep that in mind, 45 days and 180 days to close. They do not close on the 180th day. It's a done deal. They better pull out their checkbook and get ready to write a check because the service is coming for them. Okay. All right.
Makes sense. So the simplification for us as realtors then, normal transaction, except for we got a clause that we need to write on the purchase agreement.
Yes. Yes.
And make sure we guide them enough to say, you need to get an intermediary. Here's a couple of recommendations.
Yes. And please do that in writing. Do that in writing. Okay.
The recommendations?
You bet. Do it in writing that you recommend that they seek out their CPA. Do it in writing when you're giving them the referrals. And I would give them both referrals. I mean, if you have other people that you want to refer them to, that's fine too. I mean, there's nothing in it for me to go to IPX or asset preservation. I already told you why I would use them. But as far as I'm concerned, you give them the options, you give them two options, you let them decide where they want to go. You're just providing the information to them. But again, all in writing, just to protect yourselves.
Makes sense. So Tony, I know we're coming right up to our 30 minutes on this, and there was an additional clarification that somebody had.
Sure.
So if they owned the property
okay.
in Canada, but wanted to bring that money here, so a U.S. citizen who owns a Canadian property but wanted to bring it here, any difference with what we were talking about earlier in the transfer or being able to do a 1031, or is it the same situation for them?
It's the same situation. The property has to be domestic. The property sold has to be domestic, and the property purchased has to be domestic. Okay.
And another one came up. If you could repeat who the two companies are that you were recommending. Sure.
It's IPX, and you can go to ipx.com and check them out. And there's assets, that's Fidelity National Title. They're huge. When you're looking at title insurers, I think they probably would qualify as being the largest. And then there is Asset Preservation. That's a Stewart Title company. And I think they're assetpreservation.com if I'm not wrong.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful.
There's a couple other things. I'm gonna push this
a little bit
further because there's a couple other things I really think you ought to know. Again, it's in your materials. There is the option at the time of sale where the taxpayer can say to us, the title company, I'm getting $100,000 in proceeds, but I want to take $20,000 of those proceeds payable to me. That's called boot under the code. The taxpayer can do that. So they don't have to take all the money. They can just take half of it, 60% of it, whatever it is. They're the ones that are driving the bus because whatever they take is exposure to them from a tax perspective, as opposed to giving it all to the qualified intermediary and just deferring that taxable event, and again, I didn't talk about that, but the taxable event is deferred, not indefinitely, okay? It's deferred until the taxpayers get to the point where they go, you know what, we're done. We've exchanged in and out of 5 properties, and we don't want to do this anymore. This last property is where we're going to spend the rest of our life. We're all done. And so at that point, that's when the service says, time to settle up. Okay. That's
sense.
something that I think is very important to share with your clients. The other thing is there's a couple other things that I don't know, I'm sure that a lot of you have sophisticated clients that are either looking to do an improvement exchange or a reverse exchange. Those are highly complicated exchanges. Again, glassy-eyed, deer in headlights, I get it. I'm there with you. But improvement exchanges are basically where they buy a piece of property that has a structure on it that needs improvements, okay? And you're able to make those improvements with tax-deferred money, okay? Again, in an improvement exchange, basically the money's going to the QI. The QI is going to pay as those improvements occur to the subject property, all right? On reverse exchanges, they're a different animal altogether under the code. A reverse exchange is where your client finds a property before they sell their property. Okay? They find a new property before the old property is sold. That's a reverse exchange. And what happens in those cases are the taxpayer will purchase that new property, and the exchange accommodation title holder, you'll see that referred to in your materials, and I fondly call them an EAT, an exchange accommodation title holder, holds title to the property, not the money, the title, the actual title. So they basically assign you out of the transaction. They step into your shoes and they become the purchaser of that property. And the deed is not to you as a taxpayer, but the deed as the grantee is now made to the exchange accommodation title holder. They're the ones that are holding title to the property until you sell your other property. And again, got to do it within 180 days. Okay. So you got to sell that property in order to complete that reverse exchange. Keep in mind, those exchanges, improvement exchanges and reverse exchanges, are very expensive. Okay. I mean, QIs, qualified intermediaries, or in the case of improvement exchanges and reverse exchanges, exchange accommodation title holders, those guys, basically they're taking on a lot of liability, exchange accommodation title holders, and they're going to charge a lot of money. A lot of money. I'm usually talking in the five-digit range. Okay. All right. So, I mean, it's not cheap, but if we're talking about big properties, then obviously, it's worth it. It's worth doing the exchange to defer that capital gains exposure. So anyway, I think that basically, it gets us to a point where I think I've given you a good overview. And certainly if you have questions, I know Cheryl has my email. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. But again, I think your best bet is to make sure that you let your client know that I'm not a tax specialist. You need to seek out a tax specialist. And maybe it's helpful to give them a couple names if you have them. But they definitely need to understand that you're providing them information through a 1031 exchange that will certainly save them a lot of money. Okay.
And in the end, this is simply tax code, and the reason for a CPA and these intermediaries that are necessary to be able to complete this for them. In the end, as real estate agents, we're still simply selling property with the knowledge of what they're doing and potentially be able to help them save money using tax code.
You bet. You bet.
That's
And
fantastic.
and buying more valuable properties, increasing the net worth of their real estate portfolio. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great tool, and I'm sure that it's another value added tool that all of you will find very useful.
Excellent. Tony, I say thank you today for your time, your knowledge. As I put it, our goal was literally to learn about this beast that we always hear about and understand a little bit more on how we can help others. And even for me, 36 years in the business, you've taught me much today. So gang, I'm going to call that a conclusion. Let you know in advance if you haven't seen or heard our next deep dive, Hot Topic Tuesday deep dive is on May 9th. I've been able to set up with a national speaker who I've seen at the Century 21 convention. He's been with us at Coldwell Banker conventions, travels United States. He's going to be joining us via Zoom, and a connection for that will be coming out. It will not be our normal Hot Topic Tuesday deep dive connection for Zoom. You'll have to do this through Eventbrite. Those invitations will come out. The gentleman's name is John D. Reyes. He's out of California. Will be May 9th. This will be a noon to 1 session. John's going to be working with us in regards to the maintaining market relevance in a digital era. So he's going to cover things such as video marketing must-haves, AI apps for the creation of content, step-by-step video marketing strategies, text campaigns, and a whole lot more that's going to come along with that. So look for those flyers to come out. Look for that link to Eventbrite for you to be able to join in or just join in at the office, see what your manager is going to be putting together for you. So again, Tony, thank you again. Wonderful job. I appreciate y'all, and we'll see you next week. I don't have the topic yet. I'll let you know as soon as we do. Have a great Tuesday, everybody.